Good evening, and welcome to this special episode of Family Fest Barbados 2025. Our discussion tonight is the second part of a conversation we started in July during our month of festivities, as we focused on how parenting styles impact child development and society. So if you missed it, we may link it in the comments for you to check out. There were some very impactful and thought provoking insights expressed there. So please check it out. And if you haven't done so as yet, rather. But tonight, as part two of parenting styles, we will zoom in on how to navigate parenting after a breakup or divorce. And we have the same expert panel joining us tonight, and we cannot wait to get into the discussion. And welcome back, Chanel, Suzanne, Cornelius. Uh, Kindly give the audience once again a snapshot reminder of who you are. We're going to start with Suzanne. You're ready to go.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for the invitation to return, or if I can help somebody, well, that is the aim. I am a teacher of 41 years experience, both in Barbados and internationally and regionally. Um, I have two children. I went through a divorce, so this is something that I can really try to help people deal with. Um, I am a president, the chairman of Foundation School Board, and still serving in that capacity and in any other capacity that I'm invited to if people think I can help with molding young people generally, because children are the future and what they experience really dictates to a large extent how successful they are in adulthood. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Good, Chanel.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks again for the invitation as well. As My name is Shauna Aline. I'm a social worker by profession, and I am currently working in child protection. Um, Dealing with matters of child abuse, neglect, with the Child Care Board. I believe I sit in a unique position because in my day-to-day work, I do engage with parents who go through similar circumstances to be going through a divorce or a breakup, and they can see the negative impacts that it has on children. So I'm hoping that this evening that the thoughts and the experiences that I would have been, exposed to in my career and my day-to-day will be able to mesh with the other panelists, that we will be able to bring some valuable information to those who are listening.
Wonderful. Cornelius.
Hi, good evening. Great, of course, always been a pleasure to be part of any discussion about family. I am a businessman and entrepreneur during the day or for the last over 30 years. But over the last, what, maybe forever, I've been a family advocate. From the time I was a child, I've always loved the idea of strong families and what families could do. I am the chairman and founder of Family Fest Barbados. So this discussion and any discussion that I'm part of is very dear to me. So I'm looking forward to what the other experts here would bring to the table. And I'm most of all looking forward to the benefit that people will get, not only who are listening now, but who will be listening in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you
but
very
I
much.
also forgot to mention that my qualification is that I have been married. I'm now divorced. I have 3 children and 2 grandchildren. So I think that in itself kind of qualifies me.
Yes, qualified. You're qualified to speak on the panel. You all are, and in some way, professionally and experientially. And so we want to welcome you back. We're glad to have you. But before we delve into the discussion, let us take a slight recap of our discussion last time and a background of what we'll be deliberating on this evening. The parenting is a dynamic journey shaped by values, cultures, and evolving structure of the family. And last time it was a consensus in our last discussion that the end goal of parenting is to produce constructive citizens that will contribute to a better society. We also examine the spectrum of parenting styles, authoritative, authoritarian, permissive, and uninvolved, etc., and delving into their effects within the context of an intact family environment. Yet, as families grow even more complex, the challenges of parenting, especially when the household is no longer united by partnership or marriage. So, we're going to take a look at that. And the panel seeks to move beyond defining the approaches and their general effects to zoning in on the lived realities of parenting after breakup and divorce. So, when families transition into new forms, the impact of parenting styles can be manifest or at times muddied by distance, new relationships, and shifting loyalties. So we aim to unpack not only the cause and effect of different approaches to parenting in both those intact and non-intact family units rather, but also to search for the elusive balance that might help us get parenting right. So by doing so, we hope we can plant the seeds for a healthier society, a healthier adults, and ultimately a healthier society. So we are going to get right to it and begin by talking about breakup and divorce before we switch to the parenting styles. We just want to talk a little bit about that and what are some of the challenges that parents experience after breakup and divorce.
Well,
Yes, go ahead, Cornelius.
yeah, one of the reasons why I jumped at this one is because I want to make a point here right now, and I want this point to be very loud and very, very clear. Adults and children live in two different spheres. When a marital relationship ends, the parenting relationship never ends. Let me repeat that. And I want this to be heard by persons who are already divorced, who are thinking about divorce, or who may possibly get divorced in the future, and children are involved. People, because of the world we live in, can choose to go to lawyers, and a court can grant a divorce. So two human beings, two adults can get divorced from each other. However, the role or the position of a parent never ends. It lasts either until the child dies or until you die. So, having said that, I want to say, without any fear of contradiction, that because a marital relationship ends, the parenting relationship does not have to end. And that is both to the person who might think about ending it or the other parent who might think about forcing the end of it. And we'll find out what he means more about when he make that statement later on in the discussion.
Okay. All right. So we want to talk about the challenges. Um, Suzanne, you can help us to understand what are some of the prominent challenges we see happen in parenting after a divorce or a breakup.
Well, there are some basic challenges, and of course, depending on the age of the children, they would have formed bonds with both parents. So therefore, there is that disconnect in terms of being in living together with a father or a mother on both of them. And now you have most times they're living now in separate residences. So that alone is an emotional disconnect for some of the children. So they're not seeing that person every day. Now it can be positive or negative because if they're living in a home together and it is a toxic relationship, maybe it is beneficial sometimes for the children not to be in that conflict. However, it still has some disturbance for them in terms of moving to one place or another, if that is the case. For the two adults, it now depends what challenges they have is that if the divorce or the separation, because before there is a divorce, there's usually a separation. So we can look at two stages. One, where the marriage breaks down and one or the other partner moves, husband or wife moves in different directions, and they're now living in different residences. Um, it may mean now that one parent has the responsibility of the children, depending on where they are residing. So that alone is a challenge now to figure out how that parent is going to relate early in the separation. There's a lot of emotional thing between the mother and the father, usually, because the divorce from a marriage is an emotional thing. So it means there may be grudges, there may be bitterness, there may be all of those things. It is usually uncommon if it is a peaceful separation, but at times it can be, depending on the maturity of the of the couple. However, the main thing at that time, I would think, is that if the children are moved into an environment where they know, in other words, they go to grandparents that they are accustomed to and who are accustomed to caring for them, that can also alleviate some of the disturbance for them because they're still seeing people that they're accustomed to. And then the partner who has, whether it's the wife or the husband, former wife or husband, if they have the financial and the economic stability to maintain the children, that also makes the transition easier. So it is difficult to make, in my mind, a blanket statement because a lot of things play on how um, the relationship breakup plays out. But however it plays out, those children would have formed a bond with mother and father. So emotionally, it is going to have disruption, even if they are in an environment where they have supportive relatives and so on. And the financial, which we'll go into later on, for some, and it's usually females who end up with the children. And
Mhm.
if they don't have the financial um, income to keep the home going, then you can find a lot of disruption for the children. They can't go to school because money and this, you know what I mean? So that is a consideration you have to discuss as well. But there's going to be disruption. But for
Mhm.
each family, it's going to have different dynamics. And
Dynamic.
that is what we are going to have to discuss a little more in detail.
Yes. Chanel, do you have something to add there?
I am disagreeing with the other two panelists as well. I would also put into consideration the developmental stages of children when the divorce or the breakup happens and
Correct,
how it
correct.
affects the children as well. One of the things that I recognize though in dealing with parents with breakups or divorces is that sad to say, they sometimes, in essence, divorce the children too. Some parents decide, I divorce you, so I divorce. It's like they divorce the children, so there's no more of an interest or a care. So that's something that we need to kind of flesh out later
Yep,
down as well. And then the other thing too as well is communication. So at one point in time, as I tell most of my parents, I tell them, you know what, at one point in time in this relationship, y'all had actually liked each other and everything went wrong and y'all are now broken up, but y'all have a child. So what are you going to do? You understand? Y'all still need to talk. Y'all need to communicate with each other. And that's one of the biggest missing elements between parents and that are divorced or even with a breakup. They have so much animosity, hatred, the trauma of what is going on because it's trauma of the breakup, but then it's also trauma that happened in the relationship. Like if it was an abusive relationship. So there's so many different things to unpack when it comes
Dynamics.
to a breakup that we have to consider. But I would say right now, just as an opening statement, I would say the communication or the breakdown of the communication. Also, that we need to look at the developmental stage and the ages of the children when the breakup happens and how it emotionally would impact them when that happens.
Yes, very well. Cornelius, I know you want to jump in here, but as you're gonna speak, you address also what type of circumstances of in this separation that what type of circumstances rather help shape the parenting style. Yeah.
Okay, well, to answer that, let me start at the beginning in terms of what the parenting style should be or what works best. It always works best when parents are united in terms of singular minded in terms of how children are to be raised. So, for example, and I'm going to give you a practical example. Let's say, as a parent, I do not like the idea of sleepovers. In other words, I do not want my child, and we had agreed when we were married that our children would not do sleepovers, right? But then when a divorce happens or a breakup happens, you see either the man or the woman, one of the spouses decides that, I'm no longer under the roof with that person who didn't believe in sleepovers. I am okay with sleepovers. Or you might have a bedtime for your children to go to bed to get enough sleep that they can function well when they go to school. You might say, okay, bedtime is 8 o'clock. Then when the child gets then with the other parent after the breakup or divorce, there you go. You have the other parent allowing the child to go to bed at 12 o'clock, midnight. And it goes on. And invariably, what you find is that children are very smart. So you find that when there is division between parents after breakup or divorce, the children will use it to their advantage. Children are little people, but they're just as and sometimes more intelligent than we are, as adults. So that is probably the biggest thing that stands out in my mind, the need for unity and singularity. In spite of how much you hear each other as either breakup or divorcees, it is important that you recognize the value of parenting from a singular position. Parent from one part and not five. Parent from a position of understanding that even when the child when you were both together, and you are you're parenting based on the future. I would say this, that the principles that you need to employ for parenting while the family is intact is the same type of principle that you need to employ for when the family is not intact. And I say that to say this. As a parent, you should never parent in the present. In other words, the present is about right now, I hear him, and I'm going to oppose anything about him. I hear her, I'm going to oppose everything about her. That's parenting in the present. That's parenting out your emotions. That's parenting about getting even. That's parenting about bringing the current acts. But if only you could just take a moment and think, if I practice my child to this bad habit, or I destroy my child's education now by letting them stay up all hours of the night or go partying and coming home all hours of the morning, when before we have rules that said you got to be in the house by a certain time, you got to be in bed by a certain time, you actually are contributing to the failure of that child in the future. Because we all know that if you, for example, fail on education, the probability of you suffering financially later on is a lot higher. So we can, and that's a whole different discussion. The point of the matter is that let us, as two persons that decided to part, separate the breakup of the marriage from the parenting. Let us parent from a singular part.
But the trouble with that, Cornelius, is that sometimes one person wants to break up and the other person doesn't. So that's problem number one here now, because I want my family, but I want you. And the thing is that pulling, that tugging, that occurs then is one of the biggest challenges, because then um, the parent that wants to stay is more concerned about securing, or having that relationship go on, and the other person is like, I am done. I am totally done. So that's a big problem. And I like what you talked about, the maturity of the parent, because that is lacking in our society today. Because for some reason, after a breakup, everybody's get petty. Everybody, for some reason, get vindictive and that sort of thing. And as you say, they parent now, and they're not thinking about the future, the impact of what's going to happen to the child, 10, 15 years from now. So my thing is that what we really need to promote is that, what, yes, the relationship, what, acceptance. If the relationship can no longer continue, we both need to accept that, what, it is done, and that we need to do what? Focus on raising our children.
Mhm.
That's it. That's one of the first steps. If not, the persons are going to be consistently trying to fight on how I can get back this woman, how I can get back this man, and the poor child, suffering there, because now the the direction or the attention is no longer placed on them. They're more about relationship than parenting. So acceptance of the breakup. And if it is that they break up amicably, listen, I would love to see more of that being, in existence. That's a rarity because I'm telling you that right now, the level of dysfunction that I see on every day is crazy. Because the thing is that, you know what? She break up with me, he break up with me, what I done? So it's almost each other's left to his own devices. So we really need to, as you said, parent for the future. Look at a child 10 years, 15 years, make that investment now for then. Don't just be in your emotions and get all caught up with relational stuff. Just let's see if we could cultivate maturity if that's what we are doing. Cultivate some
Absolutely.
maturity.
Yes, I see that the discussion is getting very engaging. And so we just want to continue along the parenting styles route. And just to find out some more about, as a parent, how do you determine what parenting styles you should use in a post divorce or breakup situation? Anyone can go.
First of all, I was looking for thought Susan was going to jump in, but what I would tell you, and I reiterate again what I said earlier, the parenting styles that work best when you are intact are the parenting styles that works best when you're not intact. And when we talk about styles, remember from the first discussion we said there's no one style. You have a combination of styles that are documented, and it's almost like a pot of food. You kind of have a pinch of this and a pinch of that, and more of this and more of that. The various parenting styles are just documented observations of styles, but sometimes you have to be authoritarian, sometimes you have to be authoritative, sometimes you have to be democratic, sometimes you have to be all of these different things. It all depends on the situation. So at the end of the day, the important thing I think, and this is just my opinion based on my having been a father and a grandfather, is that both, as the old people would say, both parents need to sing from the same hymn sheet. Both parents need to sing from the same hymn sheet. That's it for me.
Cornelius, I wish that was the case. Then we wouldn't even have to be having this discussion because, like um, was said before by the very experienced social worker here, it is the level of maturity of the parents. And unfortunately, we do not prepare ourselves for marriage, for parenthood, or anything with any counseling. This is not the norm. This is not the norm in this society because you become a parent and you have never even thought about what is going to be your parenting style. It sounds good on paper, it is there in the book. But what it is that you know what? It guides a lot of your parenting style and it works for some children and it doesn't work for others. The parenting style after divorce may work very well for one child and another one is rebellious because they're missing the other parent and they give you more problems. So there are a lot of dynamics. You parent very often are no responsibility by how you have been raised. And this is why before marriage, that all of those things really and truly should be discussed and ironed out because one person may have come up in a dysfunctional family. And then they didn't have any rules, any regulations. They didn't have a mother, a father in the same home. It may be a father raising a person alone. It may be a mother. And therefore, you marry somebody, who has an experience of a stable home. So that person knows at least the basics of what should happen. But the other one is going to now be objectional and objective to the thing because now y'all are not on the same page. You never were on the same page, but once you were in a relationship, then at least there was a chance that you could communicate. After the divorce or after the separation, because of all the negative emotions that usually accompany that, you find that even although one parent may know that the other one is doing something right, they may object to these kinds of rules and regulations. There's also the case where, and I'll tell you, if one of the parents is, let me say, irresponsible, The other parent might have to say, listen, for the safety of my children, I have to keep them at me because I am afraid that this person who is the children's father or mother is so irresponsible that they will be in danger. So there are a lot of things that we need to look at. And what I would say to young people who are thinking of getting married or who are parenting together is get professional help. Get help from the social worker, from the psychologist. No, we have emotional intelligence. I never heard that until I was this age. We didn't have emotional, nobody talked about emotional intelligence. People reacted to jealousy, reacted to, okay, he doing that, tit for tat, and we know how that goes. One person accuse the other of some kind of infidelity, and they then go fly back and do something themselves, and it is a back and forth thing. Many times, and I have experienced this, I will say one of the things I would say to females, especially because they can come from this perspective, is
Mhm.
always be open to let your children see their father, even
Mhm.
although once the child is safe, that is all you have to say, the father or the mother, either way. But mostly it is, in other words, I done with you, as you say, so the children can go there. If once the children are safe and well looked after, encourage them to continue seeing the other either the mother or the father.
Yes,
Because
I'm go ahead. Sorry.
that is one of the basic things that I find in marriages that happens when they break down. They use the children as pawns, and that now becomes a situation where the child becomes unstable itself in understanding relationships, and the behavior sometimes becomes disruptive.
Well,
Yes. Go ahead, Cornelius.
no, I was saying that Suzanne said that they use the children as pawns. I would add, and weapons, pawns and
Wow.
weapons. But one of the things I want to introduce, Angie, and this is going to open a whole new can of worms, but sorry. And it's not a judgment, it's just a reality of who we are. All of us as human beings have some sort of issues. And I want to say that the recognition that we have issues is the starting point for change and for growth. We have people getting married every day and starting families. And I want to say that there are so many people, and I only realized it now that I started doing my little studies in human behavior and psychology. So many people are becoming parents who have mental health and emotional issues going
Yeah.
on, resulting from childhood traumas,
Mm-hmm.
resulting from both the complex and the simple traumas. And if you go into studying psychology and human behavior, you realize that trauma is a very complex area. So when you see the responses that we see in terms of the irresponsible behavior, the tick for tat, the using the children, weaponizing children, that is really coming from a place of dysfunction where you have people who have self-esteem issues. They're suffering from NPD, they're suffering from bipolar, borderline personality, whatever it is. There's so many different things on the spectrum. And nobody walks around with a tag on their forehead or on their back that people can say, but people can see when you have a broken arm or broken leg. But people cannot see the broken mindset and the broken heart and the broken psyche that you have. And these innocent people called children, they do not have a choice in terms of who they're being born to. And that's why I'm thankful for people like Suzanne and Chanel who teach and do social work, and people like Fabian Sargent, who's a social worker. And these people who I so appreciate what these people do every day, because these people that you call parents, children do not choose their parents. They end up with parents.
Mhm. Yes. Chanel, would you like to add in any more toxic trait we can see from parents when divorce happening and or breakup and in their parenting styles?
Yeah, I was gonna say the same thing Carlos was saying about weaponizing, because that's the children are just used, and I can use the word abused in that situation as well, because as I said before, the parents can't get along, so the child is just pulled hither, thither, and yon between these two adults, right? My thing is that I don't want to put through a monkey wrench either, but some parents become parents out of pure circumstance. It just happened.
Mhm.
You understand? So a one nighter, a one monther, something happen and you get pregnant, you become a mother and a father. All right, that's genetics. That's how nature does things. You see, being a parent, that's the next level, because a female with a working sexual reproductive system can, once she has a gentleman with a functioning system, they can come together and they can be a mother and a father. The next level above that is being a parent, because anybody could get a child. You understand?
That's right.
Anybody could to get a child, but to be a parent sets you apart from the what I would call the nature aspect, and you go up another level to say, you know what, I have been given this gift, and by whatever means necessary, I'm going to make sure I do a good job. Our parents of today, or I should say, our mothers and fathers of today, are not doing that. It's not about the child. It's all about them. And I think there's a refocusing that needs to happen where they understand, you know what? No matter the circumstances of how I was able to get this child, we got to figure out a way to work together, but they're not working together. So although we
Yes.
can talk about a parenting style and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
the parents themselves need help. They need to figure out who they are. You understand? Was their purpose, and some of those traumas that Carnelius talk about are some of the biggest issues, because when you start talking to them, you hear all of the hurt, all the trauma, the abuse, the dysfunction that happens in their family. And then they had this relationship that they thought was going to be the perfect thing. Obviously it did
Mm-hmm.
not work out, but now I'm left with the child, right? And this could be either
Right.
father or mother. They just left with this child, and now it's almost I have to parent alone. I don't want to do it alone. He break my heart. She break my heart. I can't. The money ain't coming in. This that trauma, 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 trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have this little child here that says, like, I looking at mommy and daddy, and what going on? They
Mm-hmm.
almost like in sticker shock. Like, these persons supposed to know what's supposed to go on with me, and they clearly don't know what's going on. So, I mean, authoritative, permissive, authoritarian. We really gotta get the parents' mindset shifted, get mothers and fathers, their mindset got to be shifted to understand that they've been given an awesome responsibility, and that if it is that the end game is a productive citizen, we got to put those positive inputs and put the emotional side where we keep on fighting each other, that we need to work together for the betterment of the child.
Beautifully said, Chanel. And in that same vein, when you think about the effects of these behaviors on children, what are some of the prominent ones that you have seen as a social worker that children exhibit coming out from a separation or divorce or even a breakup in a relationship?
Self-esteem issues.
Mm-hmm.
Children, they just, they have low
Mm-hmm.
self-esteem because the parents fighting, so there's no one to affirm them. You understand? There's no one to say, I love you. You look beautiful today. I mean, it sounds simple, right? But this is some real key things where these children have been affected because the parents, as I said, divorced. So the children feeling, low self-esteem, anger management issues and stuff like that, and fighting out, because it's like, you know what? Them fighting, so I can fight too, and they can fight to, in essence, to either
Mm-hmm.
get their attention, or I'm fighting because I am so frustrated. I have all these feelings and emotions. I have nobody to talk to, so I can find a different way to express these feelings and these emotions. So we'll start with those two, and the others can submit. But it's a low self esteem and some anger management
Thank
issues as well.
you. Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in there right away with, sorry, Cornelius, the economic. Let us
Mm-hmm.
get real. This is what the economic circumstances, which become sometimes worse. They may be bad already, and that they may be parents may not be working in a situation where, and they may have more siblings. In other words, it may not just be one or two children. And they probably were experiencing. I watched a video of a young lady from Barbados the other day, a Bajan lady, a young lady who told me she went through so much trauma going to school, trying to operate on $10 for bus fare, lunch, and everything. These are things
Mm-hmm.
that the teachers see, and I can tell you this from evidence that they come to school sometimes and even lunch is an issue. And therefore, that beginning there, the anger and the frustration comes from
Mhm.
that there. Because then, if you listen to King K, see, I listen to Calypso, I listen to the children, what he sang, and he won the thing this year. And I think it sent a message to a lot of people that these children, some of them, and I see them, I've seen them, and on a constant basis throughout my years experience in teaching, not only here, overseas as well, because it doesn't only happen in Barbados. I went and worked overseas, and there are children in the United States of America having similar problems, where lunch is a problem, where money is a problem. And unless you have a single mother, for example, working in a gas station, think about how much money she's going to be getting a week. I don't know exactly, but you know it in a lot. And
Mhm.
you have parents who might have a degree and they're still struggling to do
Mhm.
certain things. But the one that working in the gas station, the young lady or the young man, because nowadays it could be either one, they're even struggling to provide food and lunch money. And these are where I would say that Barbados has stepped in a lot of ways with the school meals and things like this to help. But nevertheless, these children, and you have to do it, we do, and they do it in a very discreet manner so the children don't feel embarrassed. But children, once they begin to trust you as a teacher, they come and tell you things because they're looking for that adult that will listen to them, that will care about them. And it is not, and sometimes parents who are going through things, they relate better to somebody who is not in the
Mhm.
same emotional trauma. They will come to somebody who they know is objective to tell you things. So the financial thing is very important because that from that stems a lot of the violence and the anger that they
Mhm.
are experiencing.
Right.
And
And
and that is just one level. When we talking now about the emotional level, just the basic financial difficulties that some of these children are experiencing.
mhm. And I also hear neglect in there. So
Yeah.
I can see how that has uh, shown up in these children. Cornelius, yes,
Yeah,
do you have
I'm going to take the baton, and this I like how this is segueing because I'm not going to deal with the dark emotional side, unfortunately. And I want to say that my heart goes out 95% to the children. My sympathy and my compassion is 95% for the children because they are the real victims. They are the ones who do not have the wherewithal. They don't work for themselves. They're not the one who own the home. They're not the one who is protecting themselves. The adults are. And I'm going to tell you something that I discovered even from my own investigations. Believe it or not, a lot of children blame themselves when their parents break up. That was a shocker for me years ago when I discovered that children actually think that it's something they did wrong. It's my fault that mom and dad broke up. So one of the things that a lot of parents need to do with children is zero in early and talk to them and reassure them that it's not their fault, that you love them, and really reassure them. That's the first thing. If that is not done and attention is not paid to those little people we call children, you have then follow-up issues like drug use, suicidal ideations, and
Mhm.
attempts. You have children that do self-harm coming out of that suicidal ideation. And then this one out is probably, I would call it emotional suicide, something called parental alienation. Now, parental alienation is a different topic altogether. We dealt with that last year, but we couldn't have this discussion without mentioning parental alienation. And parental alienation is, for example, where one parent, usually the one that gets the child, and we know most times the mothers get the child,
Mm,
actually uses psychological techniques, manipulative techniques, lies, crying, false crocodiles, tears, and all that, and manipulate the emotions of that child to hate the other parent. Now, I don't want to say to hate because sometimes, and I want to make this very abundantly clear, sometimes the result that is received is not the result that is intended. Sometimes people, out of their own emotional volatility, does stuff and it gets a result. So, in other words, I am not convinced, and I'm going to pick my words very carefully. I am not convinced that every case of parental alienation was definitely the intent of the alienator. The alienator is usually someone who is suffering from NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, which means that they don't have any empathy. All they know is lies and shame, and they deflect that certain behaviors onto their child. And the child ends up hating the other parent with whom they once had a great relationship. And I know people listening to this program, listening to this discussion now, may not be able to imagine that you have such a close relationship with your daughter or your son. You would not believe that if your marriage ends, you would never know if your marriage never ends. You would not believe that your marriage could end. And that child with whom you had a very close bond with could end up hating you to the point where they don't want to speak to you, where they don't want you to, even when if they're grown adults, they may not want you at their wedding. They may not want you. And it is very traumatic for the parent that is going through it on the receiving end. But all these are part of the fallouts of breakup and divorce on children. And when the child that suffers with or is a victim of parental alienation, a lot of times they go on and they have trust issues. They have issues with drug abuse. They themselves do not trust the opposite sex because of what they saw in their own family. So when you look, it's a real mess. When you look at the
Yes, yes,
implications of
yes.
breakup and divorce,
It's vast and wide. Yeah.
massive, you know, and
Mhm.
I really don't want anyone listening to this discussion to go away and take what we are talking about here lightly. It is extremely sinister. I would use the word sinister. What can result from breakup and its impact on children?
Right. And as you're there speaking, Cornelius, very poignant points you're making there, thought provoking. Let's talk about how important it is coordinating well with each other. And you mentioned singularity before, and the consistency of the parenting styles or whatever approach. How important is that after a breakup or divorce?
What I would tell you, Angie, and I'm going to be very honest, I'm not going to be pie in the sky here for anybody. I'm gonna just drop it. It is impossible to be singular with some people, some parents. You can
Explain singularity so that we can understand in what context you
Singularity
mean.
means that you're both singing from the same hymn sheet. In other words, you both are in agreement. In spite of how much you hate each other, you're both in agreement about the best interests of your child or children. That's the singularity I'm talking about. But when you find a person like Sean said, a person who doesn't want to get the divorce or doesn't want to break up, and they thought that you were the woman of my dreams or you were the man of my dreams, how could you do this to me? And you ran off with another woman and getting married to somebody else and yada yada yada. If that person is not regulated properly in their mind, they're gonna strike back. And if they can't hurt you in one way, they will hurt you in another way. And usually the child is the weapon. Let's keep it real. So the thing about it is that parenting, like marriage, it requires two to make it work, but it only requires one to end it. So the singular raising of your children can end because one of the parents just are not in agreement. They're disagreeable. They're contentious. They're cantankerous. So the thing about it is that we need to be real in terms of when we have these discussions that we can speak about what is ideal, but what is ideal isn't always going to be reality because you cannot work with someone who's not willing to work with you. All I would tell you, and anybody who is listening to this to me right now or in the future, always make sure that you show up doing your best. If you are the parent that is healthy, and I say healthy because the person who is dysfunctional, the person who is volatile, the person who is only thinking about satisfying their own emotions, that's what you consider as an unhealthy parent. The healthy parent is the one who can manage the situation and manage their disappointments in a way that allows them to do the best for and by the child. If you are that person, continue to do your best. I know we have a problem in Barbados and probably the world over with child support. A lot of men out there are refusing to support their children, not because they do not have the money or because they hate their child. Again, they're weaponizing the finance as a means of punishing the other parent. I want to discourage, I want to say it to them right now today. I want to discourage you from doing that because that is equivalent to somebody else doing something else, but you just using money as your weapon. If you don't have the child, you say, but you know what? I'm going to make life hard for her. I'm not going to give a cent. And then it goes
Mhm.
into a court battle, and then the court has to make an order, and then some people even go to prison as a result of owing child support. So it's just a mess. All it could do, Angie, is that we don't live in utopia. All it could do is appeal to persons who are listening to this discussion to make sure that you show up being your 100% best self each time and in every scenario. And basically put your own desires and your own emotions behind you and think first and foremost about the best interest of your child or your children. And you will know what to do.
What to do? Okay. Do you have any submission, Suzanne, on that aspect?
There's also another aspect that we could have a whole program on. There's also nature and nurture. There are children whose characteristics are more, let me say, like one parent than the other. And I'm not a doctor, but genetically, there are children to me, from my observation, that you will see as they grow, they have more tendency to be like maybe the parent that is not living in the household, for example, and they crave that parent's attention. That may be the parent that is not playing the role. But what can happen is that that child now builds up a objection now to the parent who is doing the parenting and trying to do the best in the household. And you cannot force a parent to be responsible. You cannot force, for example, you could take, okay, let's say it's either way. You have a husband, ex-husband, who decides that he is not going to give consistent financial support. As the mother, as the only parent, you are trying to hold down a job, run into court to get this money, and you hear this thing about the child money all the time. And you are trying your best to balance even the basic things: food, clothing, shelter. And this child wants the other parent to be there, even although that parent is not pulling the weight. And this can happen. In other words, so when Cornelius talk about parental alienation, sometimes it is not, and it is almost natural for the parent who is taking the responsibility to lash out sometimes verbally against the other parent who is not doing his or her um, responsibility. So the children hear that sometimes. And then there are children who want to be with the father or the mother who might not be doing the responsible thing. So you still have that connection. And I say nature and nurture is because you can have two children that one is quite willing to listen to the parent who is there, because if the other parent is not parenting at all, it is still a single parent home, really. And then you have the other child who is craving behind the parent who has left and is probably irresponsible, and they have a conflict there. And these are things that are psychological and emotional issues that we don't really deal with in terms of the counseling and things. It's very good to say, okay, parents should be on the same page. It depends on the extent, as Cornelia says, and the lady there, that the kind of mindset that they have. If they have been in a good place where they were growing up and they can see what should be done, but you still have to have the cooperation of the other parent. So it is complex. It is not easy.
It's not
But
easy.
I feel that in offering a solution and not just saying these things is that we need to really look at in home and family life and look and put more social workers, we need more people in the schools. The schools see the children every day. That is one thing. We have children who have to go to school. And if that child can find an adult that they could talk to, that they can, sometimes they just want attention. That's what I have experienced. Children used to come and sit down next to me and say, Mom, I used to wear braids at one time, believe it or not. And if your braids look nice, Mom, you look nice today. They want attention, not
It's
just
true.
attention. No, they want a mother, they want attention. And that is what they're lacking. And therefore, that is where we have to look at what can we do within the school system. And people say, I've heard teachers say, and I get away with them all the time, I ain't here to teach nobody manners. I come here to no. As a teacher, you are a parent, but the school system still needs to help and provide the support system so that they're not overburdened. Because you can't change an adult that they say that they don't want to have do the responsible thing to the children. You can try to change them, but if they don't change, that means that child still needs help. So we have to look at the educational transformation that is happening now, to look at those children who are displaying the negative behavior and try to provide a safety net so we don't have quote unquote crime. You hear me?
Mhm, mhm.
Everything is connected. It is not just the crime. How the crime happening is where we have to start looking at the source and putting the safety nets in place. Locking up people and shooting them down is not the solution. The solution is to look at the beginning.
That's right. And so, yeah, so we see the effects there of when parents don't coordinate well. And I know some parent might be saying, well, I want to do that, but the other person
Yeah.
is unwilling. Chanel, what is one thing or two things you can advise that parent to do?
Um, that's a challenging one. There's a case that comes to mind where, if the other party is unwilling, unfortunately, you can have to go to the court, for the court to intervene, because if you as two adults can no longer agree, can't communicate as it relates to care and control and provision for the children, you may have to go to court. And then the court order may have to come out to say that, the parent can have access to the child. You can try mediation as
Mhm.
well, for instance, supervised visits. Those are three, options where that parents can look into. But as I said, the goal is for the two parents to be able to communicate with each other despite the challenges of a breakup, that they put the child first.
First,
But we
that's right.
know this. We know this is as we're not living in a utopia, as Cornelius said. In a lovely, lovely world, I would love that to happen, where the parents communicate with each other, put the
Yeah.
child first. They have equal time with mommy and daddy and what's not. But the world that we live in suggests sometimes that we need to have a third party intervene, so that
Mm-hmm.
clarity and someone can make a decision on behalf of the parents who cannot seem to make the decisions on their own. I know a lot of persons can say, man, I don't want to have to go to court or whatever. And then a parent then loses time, valuable time with their children. And then only when they get to like an adult or something like that, then you try to create a relationship. But I'm saying before all of that, see if it is that is a breakdown and you as the two parents can no longer communicate with each other, get a mediator. If a
Identify
mediator
first.
doesn't work and you have to go to court, let the magistrate put in an order, the judge put in an order that
Mhm.
clearly defines the relationship, who's going to have time with the children, what time, maintenance, and everything, and just go along with that. Yes, you can have a
Mhm.
court order, and some parents still want to resist, still want to give trouble and everything. But at the end of the day, if that falls through, you can go back to court again and say, you know what, this is not working, for the court order to be adjusted. But those are the
Right.
options that I would put on the table.
This conversation, of course, cannot finish in 1 hour. But we're winding down. And I wanted to quickly
So,
address, because this was a critical question I had when it comes to parents and relationships. So as short as we could be, I know I heard someone say that you absolutely need to consider how a child feels or relate to a new love interest before committing to that person for the rest of your life or the parent's life. So, what are some critical things that co-parents should consider when starting a new romantic relationship? As short as we can be.
Well, I want to answer this question, Angie, but I have a case in my head where the father, or let me say a spouse, let me just say a spouse was, they broke up, the marriage broke up. He went ahead and they went ahead and got married on each other's side. But every time the child goes to a particular parent's house, they're treated differently, alienated, low self-worth. The parent treats the child different. And the thing is that when they were in a marital relationship, everything was beautiful, everything was nice. But then when they both got married to other partners or whatever, the dynamics changed. And now this child is having some serious psychological and emotional challenges now, navigating like, who is this parent? Because I know this parent before, I know this parent now, two completely different persons. So my thing is that, and answering your question, if it is that you are going into a new relationship, you got to know if this relationship is going to be one that's going to lead into marriage rest of your life situation before you introduce this new person into their life, because we know relationships can be fickle. So once you know that it's going to be some sort of permanent city relationship, you can inform your ex-partner that I'm looking to get married or whatever, and I would like to be able to introduce my child, our child, to this person, and start some introductions and everything like that, and then you can come back and get some feedback. It all boils down to communication, but as and maturity, and that is in a real, I would love that to happen, but we know that case by case it doesn't happen that way. But that's my suggestion, you understand? Introduce the person to them, that the children be able to spend some time, come back, talk to each other, see how they amalgamate what their feelings about the person, yeah, short and sweet.
Yes. So yeah, thank you. So definitely you see that children ought to be considered when that decision is
Yes.
being made and how they relate well to that partner. And
Mhm.
I know I want to bring in Suzanne and Cornelius, but as we're nearing, we just have about a minute or so. I just give us uh, a snippet of an encouragement to advise parents on how they can continue to achieve uh, a wonderful co-parenting relationship, um, whether using the parenting styles or what is it that they can do at this time to achieve that.
I would say that even although there may be pa- parents, who are kind of responsible and know what is happening and want the best for the children, they should still seek, to my mind, professional help when the marriage breaks down. If they know that they are immature, a lot of people don't admit, as she said, the children were not planned. In other words, these people have no idea how to parent. Still seek the professional help. We have now the ministries that provide free counseling and things like that. The social worker is there. I would say that we don't seek the professional help enough. We try to figure it out on our own. And sometimes because we have issues as well as parents, we then don't do the best for the children. But professional help is something that needs to be sought and is now more readily available than when I was raising my children. It is very readily available now. And in the
Yeah, and you.
schools, we need
Mhm.
to also, I would beg the ministry to please empower the schools to be of help because we see the children every day. And a, a good teacher with a good heart can make a big difference in a child's life when they're going through things. I'm not saying to take on everything because that would burden you. I mean, immensely if you're looking at numbers. But if we have a support system, additional guidance counselors, additional social workers, then we can then step in and help the mother, the father,
Mhm.
and the child.
Yes, that's correct. So professional help for parents and child or children.
Yeah.
Cornelius, you go ahead.
Yeah, I want to come from a slightly different angle in terms of making a national appeal. Now, we're ending this program, so I want to kind of give a general parting note. Um, the issues that we have in society right now, whether it is breakup of marriages, suicides, crime and violence, corruption, these are all things that are perpetrated by human beings who are once children, who are once babies. And I want us to stop making this more complicated than it is. And I want all of us to get together as a society and simplify it. Every single child, almost every child in this country is born in an institution, hospital. And the nurses and the professionals, they can tell the at-risk situations early, even before the child is born. These parents visit outpatient clinics and that kind of thing. I know Shauna will be able to pick up, Suzanne will be able to pick up. And we watch these children come in as newborn babies. We see them going to primary schools, and we see the dysfunction and the behaviors in primary schools. We know the parents. We know whose daddy is a gangster. We know whose mommy is involved in some nefarious activity. And it seems to me as though we observe it and commentate right until this person is at the age of picking up a gun, or at the age where they mess up somebody else's life by a breakup, and then they're not supporting, and then the whole drama. What I want to suggest is that we arrest the situation from as early as possible. I would like to see the hospitals employ social workers to be working closely with nurses and doctors in the antenatal and those kind of areas. I want to see the government. I'm telling the government now, I'm quite happy to pay taxpayers' dollars towards having social workers heavy in primary schools. I'm quite happy to support churches who want to be able to, churches are in communities, to be able to capture and show love and guidance to a lot of these children. We don't have a perfect world, so we're talking parenting. We know that some people will never be perfect parents or will never be great parents. That doesn't have to be the end. We, as responsible members of society, can chip in, both in terms of social services and in terms of regular citizens, neighbor, whatever. So that's my appeal and my closing note.
Thank you.
Let
Yes,
us approach it as a family, as a society.
Yes, wonderful. What an impactful and necessary conversation. And our panelists have unpacked and guided us through a challenging discussion and brought thought provoking insights to the fore. And for this, I just want to say thanks to each of you again. And thanks to you, our audience, for tuning in. And for those who you want to see the other part one of this discussion, make sure to check it out. And also remember to share this podcast here with family and friends and anyone you know. These conversations will be helpful to them. And so with that, I want to say, have a wonderful evening.
We're Family Fest, giving our best, empowering families to be the pillars of society. Family Fest, bringing healing and rest to hurting families, bringing help, hope, healing, happiness. With God on our side, we're marching strong, looking out for hurting children